Very sad news for all of you and people who love peace all over the world. And that is that Martin Luther King was shot and was killed tonight in Memphis.
When Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, the civil rights movement and the majority of the Black community in America was deeply impacted. The tragedy directly led to more activism and caused many individuals to find their own way to participate in the movement. For a young Arthur Mitchell, this meant starting a ballet school in one of the most prominent Black areas in New York, Harlem. For the majority of its history, ballet has been seen as an art form exclusive to aristocrats of European descent, and therefore creating a school and later a company in Harlem was groundbreaking as it encouraged diversity in a time, place, and community that deeply needed it. To help the Black youth within his own community, Arthur Mitchell founded the Dance Theater of Harlem. He believed that
in my own small way, the best thing for me to do is go to young people and give them a sense of discipline and education in their lives.
However, it quickly grew much larger and revolutionized the idea of who could be a ballet dancer. The company toured and performed all over the world throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s as the first multiracial company to do so, while promoting racial and ethnic diversity. One of the original founding members of this company, Virginia Johnson, played a major role in dissolving racial barriers through Dance Theater of Harlem, both as a dancer and as the company's current artistic director. Arthur Mitchell and Virginia Johnson broke racial barriers in dance through the Dance Theater of Harlem. When George Balanchine, arguably the most influential choreographer of the 20th century, founded New York City Ballet, he wanted to accurately represent America through a company with 6 white dancers and 6 black dancers. Though this was impossible in the racial climate of America in the 1950s, Balanchine formed New York City Ballet and the School of American Ballet, 2 of the most prestigious ballet institutions in America still today. Despite this, Arthur Mitchell became Balanchine's prodigy and the first Black principal dancer in a major ballet company in 1955. Though this is a very impressive feat, Mitchell did not want this to be released to the press. Before his first show, someone in the audience said,
"My God, they've got the company."
Despite the apparent stigma, Mitchell was only inspired
to be better and better
until he got a standing ovation.
I danced myself into their hearts.
After a long career with New York City Ballet and Dr. King's assassination, Mitchell decided to form a classical ballet school in Harlem. This idea at the time was so groundbreaking that people said that
crazy, insane, nuts, black kids could not relate.
He made dance much more accessible and relatable by allowing the boys to dress in a way that they felt comfortable and practicing to drum music because
Tendu, still tendu, whatever the rhythm is.
As the school grew, Mitchell wanted to give the students something to look up to, and thus the company was born, with the help of George Balanchine, who allowed the company to use his original works in order to build a repertoire recognizable to their prospective audience. As director of the company, Mitchell placed an emphasis on diversity as a strength, rather than sameness as a necessity, which directly opposed the way that ballet had been moving at the time of the company's founding. However, this became a factor which made the company truly stand out. Because of lingering segregation in America, the company began touring in Europe and came back with enough prestige to be welcomed by the American public. The company encouraged diversity through dance all over the world, from Russia at the end of the Soviet Union to South Africa at the end of apartheid. The group worked to be as inclusive as possible in order to give minorities a chance in ballet. One Dance Theater of Harlem former company member, Adsola Akinye, remembers being told that
it wasn't possible to be a black ballet dancer or even a black dancer
until
and the Dance Theater of Harlem helped me rise above that.
After the company's founding, Mitchell collaborated with George Balanchine to create an original work for Dance Theater of Harlem, Concerto for Jazz Band and Orchestra, to be performed alongside other works that they were permitted to use. A New York Times article reviewing one of their performances of George Balanchine's Serenade as signs of the company's artistic progress through the choreographic merits and the sincerity of the dancers. Despite initial skepticism, the audience moves past prejudice and realizes the dancers' potential and talent. Outside of their dancing, the company at the time worked to promote inclusivity and inspire a generation of Black individuals to break down racial barriers and stereotypes. Former company member Keith Thomas remembers a strength in one's identity as an emphasized skill.
I'm always aware of who I am, and I'm very proud of who I am, and that's something that has been instilled in us.
For example, to create a piece that would more accurately reflect the identities of the dancers, they adapted the classical ballet Giselle into their own story titled Creole Giselle. It takes place in Louisiana in the antebellum period, in which there was a parallel society of all black people. Starring in this ballet, along with countless others, was Virginia Johnson. As a young girl, Virginia Johnson found a love for dance, and over time, she continued to work hard for her passion. Though she started at an all-black dance school with limited opportunities, she eventually came to work under Mary Day at the Washington School of Ballet with a full scholarship. However, when she graduated, she was told not to pursue ballet despite being one of the best in her class, but maybe jazz or modern instead. She realized that you don't think of yourself as the other until somebody tells you that you are. I thought of myself as a normal person pursuing a dream, and I had to have these reminders thrown at me that I was not a normal person and I didn't have a right to that. Because of her disadvantage in the dance field as a black woman, she studied briefly at NYU after high school until she eventually left school to pursue dance under Arthur Mitchell. Throughout her career as one of Dance Theater of Harlem's principal ballerinas, Johnson starred in many notable works in which the company used their own interpretations of story ballets as a vehicle through which they could share stories in African American history that had not been shared before. Because of this, the dancers were to embrace their racial identities through what they wore. In a time where dancers of color were told to lighten their skin, Johnson and the other dancers adapted the attire to suit them.
And figuring out how to make the shoes the right color. But we came back to Sadler's Wells and we had flesh-toned tights and flesh-toned shoes. It's not erasing ourselves. It's about bringing who you are forward.
After the company's hiatus due to financial issues, Johnson took over as artistic director in 2009. Now she works to use the company to inspire and prepare black children in dance but also in life. Virginia Johnson saw Martha Graham Dance Company on a class trip at a young age and was captivated by Mary Hinkson, the first dancer she saw on a stage that looked like her. She reflected that, "I didn't know I missed myself on stage before that moment. I didn't know I had been looking for some kind of affirmation of my desire to be on the stage, but in that moment I really felt it." She kept this idea of representation close to her for a very long time and used it as inspiration for her work as artistic director. She runs several programs through Dance Theater of Harlem that work to promote the dance education of children of color as well as inspire them with representation through the company. Dance Theater of Harlem does this through their community outreach program, Dancing Through Barriers. The program fosters self-determination, teamwork, community building, and leadership to instill in our youth a desire to become citizens who make a positive contribution to society by providing people of all ages an opportunity to discover the strength of their character by exploring what it means to be part of a positive, inclusive community that supports inclusion, tolerance, equity, and diversity. As one of the company's founding members and its acting artistic director, Virginia Johnson works to provide for others both the support and opportunity in and outside of the studio that Dance Theater of Harlem provided for her. Since the civil rights movement and the original work of Arthur Mitchell, the ballet community has become significantly more inclusive, and the work of Virginia Johnson and Dance Theater of Harlem is being reflected in several major ballet companies. Misty Copeland became the first black principal ballerina at American Ballet Theater, one of the world's leading classical ballet companies, and in her experience, many dancers have the idea ingrained in them that they see ballet dancers as white. When playing certain animals, she had often been painted white, to which she realized,
"Oh, I'm always painted white, the one black girl in the company." But it made me feel very different.
Evidently, these stigmas still exist, but to a significantly lesser degree. Further, this past winter, the New York City Ballet featured Charlotte Nembres, the first black ballerina to play Marie, or Clara, in George Balanchine's production of The Nutcracker.
That she has this big role as Marie, they don't want to change her, they want her as she
From
is.
Arthur Mitchell's work with the original Dance Theater of Harlem company to Virginia Johnson's programs with the company today, Dance Theater of Harlem breaks racial barriers through education and representation in dance.